West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
So Mark, you tweeted something that worried me quite a bit, and I mean that beyond my general resting state of anxiety. So you tweeted, big council change in right-wing lawsuit to strike down anti-harassment provisions of Arizona's election procedural manual. Out is small Arizona firm. In is Arizona office of Washington, D.C. firm with close ties to the GOP. This, and then you wrote, this is an ominous turn and one worth watching. Should we be worried here?
Yeah, we should be very worried. You know, you and I have talked a lot about the role of lawyers in facilitating Donald Trump's crazy election denialism and the threats that election officials have been facing and that voters may face at the polls in 2024. And, you know, one of the things that I've been watching carefully is who are the lawyers who are still on board the Team Trump? Right after all of the activities in 2020 and the indictments and the disbarments, who are the lawyers signing up now? And what we have seen in Arizona is an alarming development, which is rather than this lawsuit being lawyered by another one of these small law firms in Arizona that, you know, we've talked a lot about before, jumping into this case is one of the most prominent Republican law firms in the country, a law firm that frankly had represented Chris Christie in the most recent primary election against Donald Trump. This was not a traditional Donald Trump law firm, but it looks like they have now thrown in the towel. They are now joining into the band of misfit lawyers who are part of Team Trump.
Why are they investing resources into this? Like, what do Republicans stand to gain by doubling down on these harassment provisions, for example, which is the issue at the heart of this case?
Look, I think that one of it is that these law firms have realized that there is no place left in the Republican Party unless you are on the Trump team and unless you are part of the election denial movement. And, you know, I think it's not a surprise that this change came at the same time that the Republican Party threw Ronna McDaniel overboard, brought in Michael Whatley, who is a lawyer from North Carolina, on an explicit platform to be more aggressive in peddling election denialism, to be more aggressive in voter suppression, and brought Laura Trump on board to be the co-chair of the Republican Party. I think the message was clear. If you are a law firm who wants to do business in the Republican Party, there is only one ticket now. There's no longer a place to be a never Trumper. There's no longer a place even to be a just not that into Trump. You are either a full-blown member of the Trump mafia, so to speak, or there's no place for you.
Yeah. And by the way, for those looking to learn more about this Republican scheme, Mark has a new piece up on Democracy Docket called Republicans Are Suing for the Right to Harass Election Workers. So I'll put the link to that right here on the screen. You can also sign up for Democracy Docket right on that link as well. Mark, how much of an impact can more competent lawyers have on a case that should go nowhere like this one?
Yeah, so look, I'm very worried because the Republican Party is upgrading the quality of its lawyers in some respects. You know, I'll say this law firm is a much better set of lawyers than some of the law firms that they've had. And I've written about this before on Democracy Docket. When Whatley took over, he made Charlie Spees, who was also a never-Trumper in the past, their in-house general counsel. And, you know, that is a bad thing for people who care about democracy. He brought on board as his outside counsel for these efforts a guy named Bill McGinley, also a competent lawyer. He had been in the Trump cabinet, but was not as closely aligned with the crazies as some of the others. So I'm worried that the co-opting of the last pieces of the Republican establishment and the last pieces of the Republican legal establishment will mean that they have more resources and more lawyers available to try to make it harder to vote and easier to cheat. I also think that we have to keep our eye on the kinds of litigation, not just the volume of the litigation that we see out of the RNC and others. But as you mentioned, I wrote this article. There are 3 lawsuits that have been filed in the last few months, literally trying to strike down laws to protect election workers from harassment. I mean, states are responding to an unprecedented wave of harassment and doxing at their local election officials. And the states are trying to pass laws that simply say you cannot harass people who work the polls. You cannot follow them out to their cars and videotape them. You cannot shout at them. You cannot do things to disrupt them from doing their jobs. And you see law firms and lawyers and groups. I'm not saying this law firm in particular, but in general, you see a growth industry of litigation now targeting to strike down these laws. I mean, who's in favor of harassing election officials? Well, I'll tell you who. People who support Donald Trump.
Yeah. Because they're the ones, by the way, who know that they're going to be the ones doing the harassing and that no one's going to harass them. And so it's just this complete asymmetry that they're taking full advantage of with the Republican legal establishment behind them now.
Right. And it's no different than what we're seeing Donald Trump do in court right now, right? I mean, Donald Trump is sending a signal by harassing witnesses in his criminal trial, by spreading lies about the judge and the judge's family, by violating court gag orders, right? He is modeling behavior that thuggishness and intimidation is a technique that is not only tolerated, but to be embraced by him and his supporters and by the Republican Party. So it is a very, very troubling development that we see him doing this in criminal courts, but it's even worse when it's targeting these election officials around the country.
Mark, when will we have the first indication of whether this strategy for Republicans works? When's the first time that they're going to go to court with this new beefed up legal apparatus so that we can kind of see whether it actually pans out for them, whether better lawyers will actually equate to more success in the courtroom?
Look, the good news is my team and we're fighting them in court. My law firm is fighting them in court everywhere they are. We're right now in more than 50 lawsuits in more than 20 states. So I don't want people to lose hope. We're going to defeat them. They're going to lose these cases, but it is a worrisome development that there seem to be more resources and more lawyers and better lawyers willing to sign onto this cause. Because even if we beat them in court now, and we can beat them in court after the election, what does it mean when we get to the next January 6th? That rather than this being a waning movement, we see more and more elites within the Republican Party, and lawyers are part of the elites. There is less resistance to Donald Trump and another insurrection on January 6th today than there was 4 years ago. And that is a troubling development. You would have thought that the disbarment and the humiliation that the Eastmans and the Giuliani's faced would have dissuaded this, but it hasn't.
Yeah. Mark, for posterity here, because this case is all centered around the election procedure manual, can you talk about what's at stake in general if this lawsuit seeking to throw out Arizona's election procedure manual succeeds for Republicans? Because I think this pretty perfectly encapsulates the mayhem that Republicans are trying to usher in.
Yeah, and it is mayhem that they're trying to usher in. I mean, the election procedure manual in Arizona is in the past is just a boring document that is put together that helps local election officials and county election officials know how to mechanically run an election, how to open the polls, how to close the polls, where to put up signage, right? It's literally what it sounds like. It's a manual to administer elections. It's not a controversial document. But yet we are witnessing an unprecedented attack on this. There are 3 separate lawsuits filed already challenging this election procedure manual. The one we've been talking about, another lawsuit filed by the Republican National Committee that wants to throw the entire manual out. They want the whole manual tossed out.
What's your analogy to the street with road signs on it?
Yeah, it would literally be like saying, let's just remove all the speed signs, turn signs, and traffic signals. We don't need red lights, we don't need green lights, we don't need stop signs, we don't need speed signs. Just like people drive.
And the goal here is just to usher in so much pandemonium that they can then say that they can then use that pandemonium as a predicate to say, look, the elections aren't working. We have, and then give themselves carte blanche to usher in whatever chaotic solutions that they want to impose for themselves that will benefit themselves.
That's right. This litigation in Arizona is the clearest example of the Republican strategy of creating chaos, making our elections harder to administer, leading them to fail in some respects. On the Republican side, they hope they fail entirely, so that they can then claim that the Republican legislature of Arizona can appoint whoever they want to be the electors, that the election results are unreliable, that you cannot trust the vote totals, and they are trying to do that by undermining the basic rules of the road for how you conduct elections in Arizona.
And I think it's so important to focus on this now, because the last thing that we want is for 6 months down the line, something like that to happen, and everybody to turn around and say, why weren't we paying attention 6 months ago? Like, this is the case. This is what it's being born out of. This is their attempt right now to usher this in. We're seeing it at the ground floor. This is them attempting to set the stage for what will ultimately be that major, major battle against democracy that would happen just a few months from now.
Yeah, I can't say this enough times. Republicans' only strategy for 2024 is to make it harder to vote and easier to cheat. They do not have an answer to the abortion question. They have boxed themselves into an untenable position on immigration when Joe Biden and the Democrats were willing to give them everything they wanted. And then they turned on James Lankford and said, we don't want anything. And Donald Trump said, blame me. Right. So they have lost that as an issue. Their candidate is currently on trial for felony crimes in New York State while he awaits other criminal trials to begin behind this case. They don't have any issues to run on. The only strategy they have is to make it harder to vote and easier to cheat. So this is a strategy. By undermining the election procedure manual, you make it harder to vote. By then having an election that does not go off smoothly, it then makes it easier to cheat. And that easier to cheat part is so important that people focus on now. Because what I worry about is people are going to wake up in the middle of October or the middle of November and say, oh my God, how come no one was paying attention to the fact that Republicans were setting up our elections to fail so that they could then cheat? Well, I'm here yelling at the top of my lungs, gesturing with both hands, like, look, the hands are off the screen. That Republicans are setting things up now to make it easier to cheat later. And we have to be aware of it now. And it is incumbent on everyone watching this video to stand up in their town square. Not everyone has 2.5 million viewers like Ryan Tyler Cohn does. Not everyone has a soapbox with social media with hundreds of thousands of followers, but every one of you can stand up in your town square by posting on Facebook, by posting on social media, by posting on TikTok, by telling your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, your customers, your clients, tell them what is happening so that we can stop it now.
It is Monday, the 29th of April of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, has come back wonderfully from her knee surgery, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special, daily special, River City Hash Mondays. Well, yes, as you may know, we had quite a weekend here. My mom, who I've been caring for on an intimate level for the last 9 years, passed away Saturday morning after falling about 3 a.m. And so, yeah, I'm a little torn up still about it, but I'm going to try to muddle through. I did Tim Corrimal's show yesterday with the same sort of idea that, and this has been my MO, that in times of tragedy or loss, sometimes it's better to get back to doing some work, just focusing on what is in front of me and putting one foot in front of the other. So I'm sure you guys all know that process or know of it. And so that's what I'm trying to do. Got a lot to do actually today. Meaning the mortuary, wasn't able to pick up Mom's body over the weekend, but they are today. So I guess my sister and I will be getting a call from them to come down and fill up papers and all that. We're going to have a larger celebration of life later on, maybe in a month or 2 months, because there's a lot of people from out of town that have to make arrangements to get here. I think that for the immediate time, our immediate family, and I guess a few friends and neighbors who want to do it, are going to have like a little ceremony, there at the funeral home, I guess. My mom wanted to be cremated, went through her papers, and I guess I wasn't so aware of that. But she had it written down. That's what she would prefer, so we're going to do that. And so she, at around 3 a.m., a little bit before, as was her wont, she would get up and, sometimes make coffee, sometimes go to the bathroom or whatnot. But my mom, for a long time, always makes these kind of like little whiny, like she's pissed off that I have to put on a shoe, like trying to, like a little kid trying to reach it kind of thing. So you grow accustomed to it and, listen for little changes and, then because you can't go in on every little utterance. But I could hear her make noises like she was trying to get her Depends back on, because she's also been incontinent for a considerable time. And, sometimes she just needs help getting up and onto the toilet. So I thought that's what was going on. So I went in there. And it was a totally dark room, which was something else unusual because she always has to have a night light on or a light on. And I couldn't see. I go, Mom, I can't see you. Where are you? And I heard her kind of whimpering, I'm right here. And so I got the hallway light on, and she was on the floor, kind of like laying down, not so much in a fetal position, but kind of. And I said, Mom, what are you doing on the floor? And she says, I don't know. I go, Mom, and I'm sorry I'm giving you a step-by-step or whatever here, but just bear with me. I have to, I guess. So I got to her, and I kind of started to roll her over, and she was like laying in a pool of blood. She had fallen, apparently, face down, and her glasses had gouged a gash above her eyebrow, and it was bleeding pretty bad. And, there was a fair-sized puddle where, in just like the minute or so that it took me to get out of bed to get to her. Oh, God. So, I rolled her over gently and immediately, when I saw that, I just, I grabbed the phone and called 911. So I'm trying to talk to the 911 operator on speaker while at the same time attending to my mom, trying to staunch this blood a little bit and keep her engaged and make sure she's okay, that her airway is clear and all that stuff. So I finally make it clear that, look, my mom's laying in a pool of blood and I need someone here now. And, so I know they have to go through the protocol to determine how serious the event is. And I said, look, my mom's 85. She fell. She's in a pool of blood. I need someone here now. And can she talk? I go, well, yeah, kind of. And is her airways clear? And I go, Mom, can you breathe? And, she was kind of making these like little mouth openings and closings and stuff, like little swallows. And she said yes. And so I told the lady, yeah, she can breathe, but I need someone here now. She's hurt really bad. So she says, okay, they're on their way, and she hung up. And it took them 20 minutes to get here. Now, you have to understand, in my little town, I could probably walk to where the fire department and the EMTs, with my bad knees, it'd probably take me 10 minutes. Might take you 3. That's how close they are. So I'm thinking 3 to 7 minutes, which is the normal response time in any environment. Took them 20. So they got her there. So they got here. They put a bandage on her, did all the vitals and stuff. And when they got to asking her name, she couldn't remember her name. She couldn't say her name. And I looked at her and said, Mom, isn't your name Pat? And she just sort of looked at me wanly. Oh, God. So they got her out to South Medford, and that's where the specialists are, to the ER. And apparently, while I was getting things together, the EMTs also said, give us like about 20 minutes because the place is, a good 20, 30 minutes away. So they said, give us, like 15, 20 minutes because you might get there before us. So I was gathering my things up, and as I was just about at the 15 to 20 minute part, apparently the doctor there at the ER at Medford, Rogue River or Rogue Regional in Medford for Asante had called. And of course, then, I wasn't, I guess, near my cell phone. I didn't hear it. So we called my sister, which is good because I was going to call her, but like on the way. And apparently my mom had vomited in the ambulance on the way there, which is obviously, as you know, not a good sign. And I should also back up and remind folks that she had carotid surgery at the beginning of the month, and she was doing so well. I mean, she still needed help. She was a little bit unsteady, but that was okay. I was there. So, yeah, my sister said, yeah, go ahead and intubate her. And so I did finally get a hold of the doctor, and he filled me in on what was going on and said she had been intubated. And, if you don't know, intubated is a fairly serious thing to have done because there's something serious going on. And he said, I need to tell you that your mom is very sick. I go, okay. He said, we're doing a CAT scan or whatever it is, I don't know if it was imaging or sonic, whatever, but whatever it is to find out if she had a brain bleed. He says, sometimes it's something else, so could be a concussion, which is still not good, but, we're waiting for the test. EKG, I believe, is actually what it was. So, so I got there, and my sister had gotten there just moments before me, and got into the ER room where they had her, and I didn't know that she was like sedated. I said, first thing out of my mouth, I said, "Hi, Mom, we're here." I said, well, she's under anesthesia right now. So I go, okay. She had a big old black eye on her left eye where she had fallen. Blood kind of like specked on her face. And her head was bandaged. And she was laying there okay. So, oh God, I'm sorry for putting you through this, but I guess I just gotta. Okay, bear with me, please. So, the doctor came in and said it's a brain bleed. And I still was thinking of the better outcome. And I said, well, can she come? How long will it take her to, come back from that? It says, well, there's not really anything that we can do because of her age. It was at the base of the brain stem. There, the recent carotid surgery. There's no way that even if she had been in her 20s and prime health, that they would risk that because it would probably not work anyway. But regardless, at 86, going on 87 on May 10th, she certainly wasn't a candidate by the insurance or anybody else. And I thought, okay, so how long will this take? 1 month, 2 months? He says, it might just take a few minutes. And I was not prepared for that. My mom is the Energizer Bunny. She bounces back. But not this time. So, said, well, de-intubate her. And I still had this idea of, before he told me it would only take minutes after the de-intubation. And he informed us that it could be rather quick. Not a day, not days, weeks, months, but moments. And he said, if by some divine miracle she does come out of this, she's not going to be able to talk. She's not going to be able to walk. She may not recognize you. And that is exactly what my mom did not want for quality of life. So I kind of let my sister, she's the nurse in the family, and we had her de-intubated. And of course, we were reminded, and we already knew, that the hearing sense is the last to go. And they gently told us it's okay to talk to her, and you should. So we did. Told Mom how we loved her and how she was a good mom. I wish I had sung to her in her ear that song that we used to get sung to by our grandma and Mom also. You Are My Sunshine. She loved that song. I wish I had remembered to sing it to her. I sang it to her here at home. So then the doctor came in. 2 nurses checked her heart. One checked, then the other. Then they went and got the doctor. Doctor came back in. I had my hand on my mom's head. I'd been kissed her forehead a few times. Told her I loved her in her ear. That she was going on a journey. She didn't have to fight anymore. All the things that she had told her sister when my aunt died from brain cancer years and years ago. And the doctor said her heart has stopped. She'd laid there a bit, and, as the process was going, she could tell that she was, breathing just a tad, a little bit, tongue moving some. I know it's mostly reflex, but still. It's still the holding on to this life in every small way. Now she's gone. And there's something, I don't know, you think about consciousness and who and what has consciousness. And the 2 dogs know that there's something wrong. Of course, the fire guys, the EMTs, had, cleaned up the blood that was on the floor with, the blankets that they had. they said it would probably be a good idea to, mop this because we just wiped it and stuff. So that's one of the tasks I did before I ran out, because that would give me enough time to let them get down the road, and that's get out the Swifter system and mop it up. But the English Bulldog, our snoozing sous chef Gunner, was like sniffing where she had been laying. And he knew. They were good friends, too. He was her protector. He always let me know. I mean, Gunner was really the one kind of woke me up. Because when he hears Mom making noises, he gives a little hoof. So probably he's the one that heard her fall, and I thought she was just getting on the toilet. Well, he's hoofed before when she's making noises getting on the toilet, but he wants me to make sure that she's okay. So, I don't want to get too deep into familial relationships, but my ex-wife, the mother of our child, our now dead adult son, the grandmother of his kids and our kids, our grandkids, well, she and my oldest granddaughter came down to stay. And since it was such a sudden thing, my granddaughter was in Eugene, and so Carol picked up Talia on the way from Salem, go past Eugene, then on to here. But she didn't really have much in the way of clothes, but my mom's got that's one of the discussions my sister and I were having, is that we got to go through her clothes, and, the girls in the family should pick what they want, and, we'll donate the rest, wherever someone will take it, because she's got a lot. But my granddaughter, Talia, was kind of chilly down here, and said, just get some of Mom's, choose some stretch pants and put them on. And Gunner did not like that. He did not want her putting on Mom's clothes. Now, you have to understand, Gunner and Talia have been best friends. It's like we always make the joke, oh, that's Gunner's girlfriend. But as soon as she wanted to put on Mom's clothes, he was not going to have any of that. And of course, they were both standing at Mom's door this morning, waiting to get in, because that's one of the first things they did, was to go say hi to Mom. Mom's not there anymore, and I'm trying to help them through it too, because I don't care what anybody says. At least these dogs have massive amounts of feeling and memory. So there's that. I don't know how much more of a show. I actually curated a show for you, and why don't I go ahead and let's see. Let me get this open here and give you a rundown on what we have in store for you. We may have to hurry up to do it. So let's do that. Yes, at the top, Mark Elias discussed the GOP's dangerous attorney swap. Yeah, I guess the GOP's going all in. I want to remind folks also, and I tried to mention it to the MAGAs here, they always want to both sides things. Well, what about Antifa? Well, Antifa is not the Democratic Party. Let's be clear. But the Republican Party is MAGA. There's only one party that's tried to overthrow the United States of America recently, and that is not Antifa and the Democratic Party. No matter what Bill Barr says, how dangerous we are compared to them. On the rest of the menu, a federal judge sentenced a longtime DEA agent to 4 years in prison for leaking agency intelligence to defense lawyers in a $100,000 bribery scheme. Wow, they're having a lot of problems over there at the DEA. Multiple civil cases and a federal investigation are testing the Tesla claim that drivers are solely responsible for their crashes, and 6 California House races could help determine control of Congress. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where 9 people charged in connection with a far-right plot to topple the German government are going on trial today. Boy, this is like some sort of pandemic sweeping the globe. The virus of Nazism. Or is it a bacteria? And tens of thousands rallied in Madrid to urge Spanish leader Pedro Sanchez not to resign after a right-wing smear campaign targeting his wife. And I should give an update. He has just announced he will not resign. Good. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Just going to tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, and it is out of the Associated Press by Larry Neumeister, Jim Mustian, and Joshua Goodman. A federal judge sentenced a longtime U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration agent to 4 years in prison for leaking DEA intelligence to defense lawyers in a $100,000 bribery scheme that prosecutors said jeopardized drug cases and the lives of confidential informants. John Costanzo Jr. was found guilty last year of bribery and honest services wire fraud, joining a growing list of DEA agents convicted of federal crimes. Another former DEA agent or supervisor, Manny Recio, is scheduled to be sentenced next month in the same case. U.S. District Court Judge Paul Otkin, in handing down his sentence, noted that the 49-year-old Costanzo was especially culpable as a supervisor because he knew what he was doing was wrong. Costanzo, addressing the judge before sentencing, expressed regret for his actions. "This is my cross to bear," he said. "I will try to find a silver lining in all of this." Yeah, you might be able to get commissary privileges. Might. Prosecutors urged the judge to sentence Costanzo to at least 7 years behind bars, saying he abused the tradecraft he mastered as a narcotics investigator, steeped in the world of money laundering. He worked in supervisory roles in Miami and later at DEA headquarters out of D.C. Costanzo acted purely out of greed, prosecutors wrote in court papers. He used his network connections and skills to hold himself above the law and make money for leaking law enforcement secrets, undermining everything he purported to stand for. Much of the case turned on text messages and wiretap phone calls between Costanzo and Recio, who remained close. After Recio retired from the agency in 2018 and began working as a private investigator for Miami defense lawyers, prosecutors allege that those attorneys, David Macy and Louis Guerra, bankrolled the bribery scheme and used the leak information to approach new clients facing federal drug charges. The attorneys have not been charged, but prosecutors in January asked the court for permission to access normally privileged communications. The DEA did not respond to a comment. Costanzo's sentencing came less than 2 weeks after a federal jury in Buffalo, New York, convicted another veteran agent of obstruction of justice and lying to federal agents in a sprawling corruption case. Over the course of a year, Recio repeatedly asked Costanzo to query names in a confidential DEA database to keep abreast of federal investigations that would interest his new attorney employers. Well, in exchange, prosecutors said, Resio secretly funneled bribes to Costanzo, including plane tickets and a $50,000 down payment on a condo in suburban Coral Gables. The conspiracy relied on middlemen, including Costanzo's father himself, a retired and decorated administration agent who prosecutors said lied to the FBI. Prosecutors said Costanzo and Resio also used sham invoices and a company listing its address as a UPS store to disguise the bribe payments while deleting hundreds of messages and calls to a burner phone. Trisha Thadani of the Washington Post brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. As CEO Elon Musk stakes the future of Tesla on autonomous driving, lawyers from California to Florida are picking apart the company's most common driver assistance technology in painstaking detail, arguing that autopilot is not safe for widespread use by the public. At least 8 lawsuits headed to trial in the coming year, including 2 that have not been previously reported, involve fatal or otherwise serious crashes that occurred while the driver was allegedly relying on autopilot. The complaints argue that Tesla exaggerated the capabilities of the feature, which controls steering, speed, and other actions typically left to the driver. As a result, the lawsuits claim the company created a false sense of complacency that led the drivers to tragedy. Evidence emerging in the cases include dashcam video obtained by the Washington Post, offers sometimes shocking details. In Phoenix, a woman relying on autopilot plows into a disabled car and is then struck and killed by another vehicle after exiting her Tesla. In Tennessee, an intoxicated man using autopilot drives down the wrong side of the road for several minutes before barreling into an oncoming car, killing the 20-year-old inside. Tesla maintains it is not liable for the crashes because the driver is ultimately in control of the vehicle. But that contention is coming under increasing pressure, including from federal regulators. Late last Thursday, the NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, launched a new review of autopilot, signaling concern that a December recall failed to significantly improve misuse of the technology and that drivers are misled into thinking the automation has greater capabilities than it does. Meanwhile, in a twist, Tesla this month settled a high-profile case in Northern California that claimed autopilot played a role in the fatal crash of an Apple engineer, Walter Wang. The company's decision to settle with Wang's family, along with a ruling from a federal judge concluding that Tesla had knowledge that its technology was flawed under certain conditions, is giving fresh momentum to cases once seen as long shots, legal experts said. Leo Wick of the Los Angeles Times brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Over 2,000 miles west of the nation's capital, the battle for control of the House of Representatives in 2025 is being waged in farmland along Highway 99. Fast-growing commuter communities north and east of Los Angeles and Orange County beach community towns and inland suburbs. While Republicans currently have a razor-thin majority in the House, partisan makeup of next year's Congress will almost certainly be decided this November, at least in part, by a handful of hyper-competitive California races. California is, along with New York, one of the most important paths to potential Democratic control of the House, said David Wasserman, senior editor and elections analyst for the nonpartisan Cook Political Report. Democrats underperformed in both states in 2022, in part because of their in-state political dominance helped Republicans channel voter frustration into anger toward Democrats, Wasserman explained, but many of these districts are likely to perform better for Democrats in a presidential cycle, given that Trump's spot at the top of the Republican ticket. The former president remains unpopular in California and, as we all know, faces criminal prosecution in 4 separate trials, all of which make his presence on the ballot a potential hindrance for California GOP candidates. If Democrats are to have any hope of winning the majority, they probably need to win at least 3 Republican seats in California, Wasserman said. The Cook Political Report has rated 10 California races as competitive, with 6 of them rated as either lean Democratic or lean Republican or a toss-up. The most competitive races are 6 that are being targeted by both Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and the NRC, the National Republican Congressional Committee, with establishment party backing likely to bring even more attention and funding to the districts. 5 of the 6 seats are currently held by Republicans, with 4 of those, 5 in congressional districts that Biden won in 2020. The other 4 races, which include the seats currently held by Representatives Josh Harder, a Democrat of Turlock, Mike Levin, a Democrat of San Juan Capistrano, Young Kim, a Republican from Placentia, my old hometown, and Kevin Kiley, a Republican from Rockland, are in Cook's slightly less pliable likely Republican or likely Democrat categories. With little more than 6 months to go until election, these are the most hotly contested races to watch. All right, that brings us to our break, and sorry for all the delays here, but once we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1946. That was the day 8,000 UAW workers at the Alice Chalmers plant in Milwaukee voted overwhelmingly to walk off the job. Close to 12,000 production and maintenance workers were on strike across the country. Workers rode the post-war strike wave as whole industries moved to peacetime reconversion. Historian Eric Slocum notes that UAW Local 248 had a historically militant left-wing leadership, was known for its support to housing desegregation campaigns in the city, and was a central driving force of Milwaukee's CIO Council. They had built a strong shop steward and grievance structure at Allis-Chalmers and were sure victory was certain. Local President Robert Busey insisted wage increases were not at issue, but rather unresolved issues remained to be settled now that the war was finally over. Key points of contention were the company's demands to eliminate maintenance of membership agreements that guaranteed the closed shop and union dues. The company also wanted to stop paying stewards for the time involved in grievance procedures. The Allis-Chalmers strike was a harbinger of things to come. Historian Martin Halpern states that the company officials played a significant role in the crafting of Taft-Hartley legislation as the strike unfolded. Allis-Chalmers was on a union-busting campaign and made no small effort to red-bait union leaders for months in local newspapers. By the fall, workers at the smaller plants had returned to work, but the Milwaukee local stood firm. Area CIO workers joined picket lines in support, only to be brutalized and arrested. The House Un-American Activities Committee arrived in town to investigate the strike, and the company instigated a vigorous back-to-work campaign. After 11 months, the strike was called off with no contract and 91 union leaders fired.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. And thank you also for putting up with the massive delays. We had a few crashes at the last minute that I had to reboot, and of course, sometimes that takes time. So I apologize. Well, we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 46 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs around 60, so a tad cooler than what we had over the weekend. Cloudy skies this morning will become partly cloudy this afternoon. Winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Partly cloudy overnight with lows in the mid to upper 30s, so a bit cooler overnight also. Winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then intervals of clouds and sunshine tomorrow with highs around 60, maybe a tad higher. Winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. We do have rain in the forecast, but later in the week. And we also have a slight chance of rain, well, in the next 4 to 6 hours. So it's one of those kind of springs. Grass pollen is rated moderate here in our little hamlet of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in that good range at 37 parts per million. Ooh, and that daytime UV index is high at level 6, so do take care. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.22 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles. And relative humidity is at 73%, so we're drying out. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 61 degrees and sunny. Paris is 66 and partly cloudy. Rome is 80 degrees and fair. Bagram is 44 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 66 with rain. Tokyo is 68 degrees with rain. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 54 degrees and mostly cloudy with a sheep grazier advisory. Get your sheep in. It's going to be raining copious amounts of rain, and your sheep may be in danger. They have sheep grazier warnings in their weather reports. Chicago, Illinois is 65 degrees and mostly cloudy, and New York is a wonderful 76 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. Ah, New York in the spring. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Kirsten Grieshaber of the Associated Press's World Desk brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. 9 people were charged with terrorism in connection with a far-right plot to topple the German government went on trial today in one of 3 linked cases. The trial opening in Stuttgart is the first to open in relation to the purported conspiracy, which came to light in late 2022. It is focused on those defendants of the Reich Citizens Group who were part of its so-called military arm, German news agency DPA reported. Federal prosecutors in December filed terrorism charges against a total of 27 people, one of whom has since died. 9 of the suspects, some among them a self-styled prince and a former far-right lawmaker, will go on trial on the 21st of May at a Frankfurt state court in the most prominent of the 3 cases. The other 8 will go on trial in Munich on June 18th. The Frankfurt case includes Heinrich VIII, Prince Reuss, whom the group planned to install as Germany's provisional leader, Birgit Malsack-Winkemann, a judge and former lawmaker with the far-right ADP party, the Alternative for Germany party, and a retired paratrooper. The proceedings of the 3 cases are expected to last well into 2025. German Interior Minister Nancy Faeser said on ZDF Public Television that the trial shows the strength of our rule of law, that the largest terrorist network of Reich citizens to date has to answer for its militant plans to overthrow the government. Geez, I just wish America would do that. Siren Giles and Joseph Wilson of the Associated Press World Desk brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez vowed to stay in office and govern with even more strength today, Monday, ending days of speculation he might resign to stop what he called a smear campaign against his wife after she was accused of corruption. Sanchez shocked the country last Wednesday when he announced he would take 5 days off to consider his future following a court's decision to open preliminary proceedings against his wife on the allegations. A platform linked to right-wing causes, the Manos Limpias, or Clean Hands, accused Begonia Gomez of using her position to influence business deals. The group has acknowledged that the complaint was based on newspaper articles. Spanish prosecutors say it should be thrown out. Gomez has not been indicted. Sanchez's resignation would have deprived Europe of a prominent socialist prime minister at a time when the center-right increasingly holds sway and ahead of European elections in June. But The politician who has forged a reputation as a steely survivor announced today that he would once again push on. I have decided to continue on with even more strength at the helm of the government of Spain, he says in a televised speech after informing King Philippe VI of the decision. It is a decision that does not mean a return to the status quo. This will mark a before and after. I promise you that. He did not say, however, what steps he would take. The leading opposition Conservative Popular Party has said, Sanchez's behavior is unbecoming of a leader. Wah, wah, wah. The Eurozone's fourth largest economy has been riveted by the unusual episode that began when Sanchez, Prime Minister since 2018, canceled his public agenda and holed up in his residence, the Moncloa Palace. In an emotional letter he posted on social media platform Twitter, it's not X, he declared himself deeply in love with Gomez and said that he could no longer stand aside and watch her being targeted. He said the moves against her constituted a personal attack on his family and he needed time to decide on his priorities. The suspense ahead of today's announcement was such that Spain's state broadcaster put a 10-minute countdown clock on the screen. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And I just want to add, I really appreciate and thank you to all of you who have reached out in this time. It is very, very much appreciated and felt deeply in our heart. And our mom would be shocked and surprised by the outpouring. So once again, thank you very much. Okay, we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.